Alperen Şengün. I think there's like a very real case that we could flip flop these two guys, Mobley and Şengün, for sure. I ended up with Şengün slightly higher. I believe you also ended up with Şengün slightly higher.
Yep.
To me, this is just one of the best offensive hub bigs that we see in the league. Averaged 21 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists last season.
Those are pretty good numbers, Sam. Those are pretty good numbers.
Those are pretty good numbers, Bryce. Those are pretty good. But it's the way that he does it that I think is so impressive, right? Like he can, if he gets a mismatch on the block, he can take that guy on the block and just absolutely hammer him and go to town, right? Out on the perimeter, like can run all sorts of fun, like dribble handoffs into rescreens, into resets, into drives to the rim. He can pass on the move. He's an excellent live dribble passer. He's unbelievably creative with the ball in his hands. I think just his basketball mind is slightly at a different level, frankly, than like what Mobley's is on offense, for instance, right? And like Alperen Şengün's basketball mind is at a different level than like most players in the NBA, just point blank, right? Like, honestly, the clips you're going to see on the screen are just the passes from Şengün. His passing ability is incredible to me. And I love watching him just like think through spacing on the court as well. That's why I don't think he needs to like shoot threes. That's actually not the thing I'm most worried about with Şengün as a scorer. I don't think he needs to necessarily shoot threes because he's so smart from a spacing perspective. Now, it would help Houston a lot if he could shoot threes because they've drafted some non-spacers. But the way that he thinks through screening and using his frame and getting away from his man, sinking into empty spaces, I think he's just really smart at that stuff. And that's what makes him valuable.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's a really good screener. He is so much better in the pick and roll than what I thought for someone who isn't super twitchy or explosive vertically. He has the kind of unique little floater that he shoots. He's able to do it with both hands, real crafty in that area. I went back and was looking at my notes from the game he played against Wimby early March. He dropped 45 and 16 with 5 steals and a block in this game, Sam, and was just incredible. Yeah. And the first 2 times he tried to attack Wembanyama, he missed. But then he figured it out. He went a little more finesse and he used some more nuance in his footwork. And he has that full bag of all of those different things. And so that was what was impressive. And then I know we'll probably dive into the defense even more, but I think he'll get better and better in almost a Jokic sort of way, just knowing where his hands need to be in a ball screen coverage and getting him in the pocket passing window to get a deflection, get a steal. And so that way he doesn't have to rely on his lack of vertical pop and the lob pass going over his head, just understanding how he can play that cat and mouse game, play angles, passing lanes. He's going to get beat in some of those situations. It's just the nature of the beast. But I just think he's really skilled. And I think when I started out, I had him a little bit lower. And then I went back and read my notes and I looked at the numbers and I'm just like, I'm undervaluing him right now. I'm undervaluing him. It's a lot more fun to talk about, the athleticism. And so often we talk about athleticism and ceiling in the same breath. And I think, I hope you and I are pretty nuanced at not doing that, but it's easy to fall in love with those things and lower the ceiling of the guys who maybe aren't as athletic. So I felt pretty good about where we ended up with him, where I had with him, because he's been really, really good.
He is, borderline, like pretty close to being an all-star as it is. Now, like I made the case at the time and will continue to make the case. And I think Rockets fans figured that out throughout the year, that if the Rockets were going to have an all-star last year, it needed to be Fred VanVleet. I thought Fred VanVleet was their best player all year. And I know that like statistically, you look at the 21, 9 and 5 and you will see Şengün's numbers look better. I thought Fred was their best player last year, just kind of point blank. But the thing that I'm most worried about with Alperen is if he is not going to shoot, he needs to be like a punishing finisher around the basket.
Yeah.
And right now he's probably a below average finisher for a big around the basket. It's like an average finisher league wide, but like a below average finisher for a guy that's 6'10 and a half, 240 pounds, whatever he is, looking at the screen, 235 pounds, and is like as physical as he is. Like he plays a physical brand of basketball. He has like that lower center of gravity and can just kind of move guys around, right? Made 62.5% of his shots at the rim last year. Among bigs, the guys that he's kind of close to in that regard are Nikola Vucevic. Let's see here. Paul Reed, according to Synergy, is like right in this ballpark. Day'Ron Sharpe is right in this ballpark. Julius Randle is kind of in this ballpark, right? And that's, I will say, like the name Julius Randle, like does come to mind a little bit for me when I watch Şengün. I think that there are some similarities there. I think Şengün is more inherently creative than what Julius is. I think Julius is like more of a slasher driver, and they played like different styles of basketball, right? Like they're not stylistically similar in how they play the game, but in terms of like what their role is on a court, in terms of what you're asking them to do, and Julius Randle is a multiple time all NBA player. So if Alperen is that, like, this is an enormous win for Alperen, right? Maybe not an enormous win, but like it's a very plausible outcome that I think would be a good outcome for him. But I wonder how easy it is to build a winning roster around that if the defense doesn't showcase real improvement. I think that Houston fans often try to like, I don't want to say excuse Alperen's defense, but like make a case for it being good. And I will say that I think he got better this year on defense. I think that his positioning in ball screens like got drastically better. That's the biggest thing for me. He's always had like pretty good hands and has always had good hand-eye coordination. He's always been able to get deflections and make plays like that. But I still don't think he is a impactful defender when I watch him.
Sure.
Like there is a real difference between him and Nikola Jokic when I watch those two. Like Jokic just feels a little bit longer. He feels a little bit stronger. He feels like he takes up more space, feels like his feet are actually a little bit quicker in recovery. I'm not saying Alperen can't get to that kind of level, but I do think he is demonstrably a bit lower than that level whenever I watch him play. And I think that he needs to continue to showcase improvement, because otherwise we're then talking about like a non-shooting, non-defensive big. And as we know in today's NBA, it's really hard to win at the highest levels when that guy is one of your best players, which with this ranking, we're kind of saying that we think he can be. So that's why he didn't end up higher, despite the fact that he's 22 years old and it averaged 21, 9, and 5 last year. I just think I still have questions on his game winning at the highest levels in a ways that like I don't on some other guys. And honestly, if we were re-ranking this list, I would have him. In fact, I actually think I did have him higher than the guy we have coming next on the list. And we'll talk about that. That's its own can of worms. But he needs to be able to protect the rim, play in space a little bit better, and like actually make an impact. Like I felt like he got lost in no man's land when he was younger, like way more often, like the first 2 years. I thought he got lost less often in no man's land in ball screens this year, but it did still feel like there was a lack of disruption from him in those kind of actions.
Well, the next guy on the list is the one I'm least confident in, so I'm not excited about that conversation because I didn't know what to do with him. So just to continue to foreshadow that or tease that or whatever the term is. Yeah, I mean, the thing with Şengün on the defensive end, Sam, he might be in a pretty good position just to be neutral, though, with what the rest of that roster may have. I mean, we talked about Jabari Smith Jr. last episode and what he could be defensively. We just raved about Amin Thompson and what he is defensively. Tari Eason and what he could be defensively for this team. Reed Shepherd, not necessarily on the ball, but off the ball. So my point is, And again, I weighted this stuff whenever I did my rankings in terms of I think the Rockets are very much on the rise, and Şengün maybe not being a plus defender, maybe capping out at neutral on this Rockets team isn't the same as maybe some other teams who don't have those wing and perimeter defenders that team does, and then what he does offensively. And one thing I'll throw at you, just curiosity, I agree with you that the rim finishing isn't maybe what you would want from a big. Does his finishing from 3 to 10 feet, which he's done at almost 50% the last 2 seasons on pretty good volume, and 10 to 16 feet, which he's done at almost 50% the last 2 seasons, does that make up for it in any way? The fact that his touch is so
Yeah.
good in that next level that it makes it like, okay, maybe he's not going to go and hammer one home or draw a foul. Maybe that's the negative side of this, but he can still score the ball pretty efficiently in a lot of those play types because he has such good touch a little further from the basket.
I think yes. I think that has potential to really, continue to improve, but it's like different. To me, they're different skill sets, right? Like Alperen is not particularly vertical,
Sure.
which means like around the basket when he is being contested by another guy who's like just as big as he is, if not longer, a lot of the time, maybe not bigger, but longer. I think that he can struggle to go kind of through that guy. But if he gets a little bit of space, a little bit of separation, I think his touch is actually pretty good around the, like in that area. So to answer your question, like I think he would need to be like Nikola Jokic level as a finisher. And I don't think he has that level of touch.
Sure.
I just don't. Like
very few do, Sam. Very few do.
Nikola Jokic, like in terms of like around the basket and like even like extended it out to 3, right? Like that's just like a different, that's like all time level touch. That's not, hey, this guy has great touch around the rim, which I think Alperen absolutely does. And I think deserves an immense amount of credit for continuing to improve and grow in that way. But to me, they're just like different skill sets. And also, again, like I feel like Jokic's release point is a little bit higher around the basket in those areas. He takes those shots from like fucking behind his head, it feels like a lot of the time. And that leads to like fewer contests around the rim or like less contested shots, let's say, around the basket. So it's he's an interesting player in that way. Trying to figure out what he can be as a scorer is fascinating. Like he is, to me, he's like kind of already ahead. Like I don't even know if he's ahead of Sabonis as a scorer, but like there's
Probably right.
kind of a lot that he does like as a scorer.
Yeah,
like driving the ball and like being creative. Like I feel like Sabonis is more of like a post hub, whereas like he's like a dribble handoff driver and like is able to do like a lot of different. He's such a fascinating player, Alperen. Like I love him. I do. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly it is. The last thing I'll note here on Şengün though is with the Rockets, right? The Rockets have 7 guys on this list, basically
7.
from number
repeat that 7.
14 to 40, right? 14 to 38, 37, wherever we had. I think Tari was the guy we probably had lowest, but like we still love Tari Eason and we think he's like an unbelievable player. They have 7 of those guys from 14 to 35 to 40, right? They don't have anybody in the top 13 here.
This is what we've been saying about. Yeah. Yes.
I don't know that they have. I say that to say I don't know that they have the number 1 guy right now.
Agreed.
And how they go about acquiring that guy, either via development of Alperen, Amen Thompson, Reed Shepherd, or a trade for, whoever comes available. I don't want to name names. That's going to be the most interesting part of their build now moving forward. They've done I don't think it's easy to accumulate this much talent. It's not. Their front office has done an unbelievable job of scouting and evaluating and finding guys that are awesome at basketball. I think they don't get enough credit for how well they've done doing those things. The job does get hard now because you have to find the number 1 guy if you're going to compete for a title. They have more trade chips than anybody in the league probably to be able to go get that guy. But they now have to find him. And it could be on their team. It might not be, but in my opinion, the odds is that it's probably not on their team currently.
I think I agree.
So that's kind of where we sit on the Rockets. And we love Houston. We love this team. We love this group. It's no secret there.